As we get older, it becomes more and more tricky for us to get up and down on the floor. And the thing is, it's something that we do always need to do, and if it's starting to get awkward, it's much better to deal with that now rather than to pretend it's going to go away at some point, because it never will. It's only going to get more and more difficult. So what we want to think about is, why is it difficult in the first place? So let's go through that movement itself, shall we? So the first thing I'm doing is, most of my weight is going through one leg as I control down. Okay? So first thing to look at then is, what's the strength like in your legs? So if we don't have that strength ability to start with, it's going to be an awful lot trickier. Second thing, we need to have that flexibility through the spine, through the hips, around the knees and the ankles as well. So all of that will be contributing factors. And the last thing is, what if it's actually just uncomfortable either on the wrists or the knees, on the floor itself? So certainly with the knee discomfort, that's not such an easy one to cure, for want of a better word, through exercise, but obviously having something soft you can kneel on can make a massive difference to that. As for the wrists, well, a lot of the time with that one it's going to be either not putting your hands fully on the floor so you're up on the fingertips slightly, or just working on some of that mobility around the wrist, which you can do just up against any sort of surface and just gently flexing back and forth over the top of that to encourage that movement, which will get better as you stretch it over a period of a couple of weeks. So let's go back to the top of the movement then, and the first thing I wanted to do was to check on that ability, strength ability, so how easy is it to get down towards the floor and back up again. So for this, all we're going to do is simply squat down as low as you feel comfortable and back up. You can always use a chair as a measure. How easy is it for you to get down, hold yourself there and get back up again? Let's do a few of those. And the thing is that, especially if you're just starting out and you haven't done much exercise for a while, you don't want to launch yourself straight into going down as low as you can and then back up again. It's just easing into that movement. And after a few repetitions, just shake the legs out, give it a bit of a break, and then try that again. And see if that's already starting to get a little bit easier. But we're looking for that overall ability. So if you're struggling, simply get down onto a chair and then stand back up again without any pausing, or you're getting down, maybe drop at the bottom, you're going to have to swing yourself to get back up. Although we know we need to be working on that squat strength as a key part of your workout. The next part of it is going to be that flexibility from the hips. So for this, we're going to tilt the hips, so you push the hips back, keeping that arch through the spine, and pay attention to how low down you can reach without collapsing through your back. So as we're doing this, you want to feel this tension through the back of the legs and into your bum. At the top of the movement, squeeze your bum, driving the hips forwards. So with any of these movements, if you start to get more discomfort rather than less, you need to stop. Because obviously something isn't quite right. But for most of you, most of the time, it should feel as if it gets easier and easier to do the movement. Once you've done that, go back and check the squat again, because a lot of the squat movement actually comes from the back of the legs and the bum anyway, so you may already find that that is starting to get a little bit easier. And we'll squat down again, but this time we will actually take a seat. So we're going to look at the front of the hips now, as we simply lift foot off the floor. I'm not trying to force anything, but do pay attention if you feel that one hip is a lot more awkward to do than the other, as we need to spend a bit more time working on one side perhaps. Again, just trying to get that engaged through the front of the leg there. And give that a break. And then we'll try and straighten the leg. So now we're working just above the knee. But it's not as easy holding that leg out, so we'll be working right the way up to the hip as well. And for now, we'll switch from one leg to the other, as this is much more about ability rather than trying to challenge the muscles so much that they get completely tired out. So what we're looking for here is, are we able to get some obvious improvements in that ability by doing a few little mobility and strength exercises. So if we can, awesome. Focus on that first of all. And rest that down there. And again, check for ability. Is it getting a little bit easier to get up and down? And then from there, we're going to test out that ability to get back down to the floor again. But rather than just launching straight into it, use that chair as an assistant for you. So as you start to come down, you can place your hand on the chair and take some of the weight off the leg. And as you do that, can you comfortably get down to the floor? If you can't, then obviously we need to spend a lot more time on that leg strength. Talking of which, next thing we want to do is almost in exactly that same position, so we're going to do a split squat. The advantage with this is that it's not too difficult to balance compared to trying to do things on the single leg. And it's quite a small movement. Just bend the knee a little bit and then deliberately focusing on that front leg, squeeze leg straight. Switch that to the side, might be easier to see. So control a bit and then squeeze that thigh, coming up tall. And repeat. You can see there's not a huge movement as I do this. What I'm trying to do is keep that tension through the leg all the way through the movement. So if you find that's easy, awesome. Because at some stage we need to add some extra resistance to that. Now, obviously if you've got some dumbbells or kettlebells lying around, great, use those. Otherwise, you can even just put some tins into a backpack and just put that on your back. So anything that's going to add a bit extra on top of your body weight to make it more challenging. So it's that small movement still, and deliberately tensing the leg at the top. Steady movements in all of these. If you think about it, the stronger your muscles are, the easier it's going to be to control down to the floor and to get back up. But strength gains don't happen overnight. So if you find, just having done this workout, that it's much, much easier to get down to the floor, awesome, that's great. But that's simply happening, I'll switch sides now, because we're getting better activation through the muscles. They're getting more used to the additional demands. what you need to do is keep on doing these exercises, adding a bit more resistance, a bit more weight each week. Even if that then means you're only able to do 3 or 4 repetitions, that's fine. Get that physical strength up, which will take at least 6-8 weeks before you're actually really building true strength, as opposed to just getting more used to what the body is capable of doing without breaking down and getting sore. Now, one thing I haven't talked about this so far is knee pain. So I'll put that down for a second there. So what we often find is that one of the limiting factors is simply that whenever you try and bend the knee, you get pain through the knee. So I'm going to do an over-exaggerated squat. What people often do is something like this as they try and squat down. The heels are lifting the floor and all that weight's going forwards. And the thing with the knee joint is it isn't a simple hinge. What happens is that when the leg's straight, the joint is pretty much like this, but as it bends, it rolls underneath. So it's not just a hinge, but there's a sliding motion going on with that as well. And some of that discomfort around the knees is where the forces are sliding too much that way. And what we want to be able to do is change it so the force is going through the leg in this direction. So in other words, rather than it sliding forward, it's pulling into the joint to give it more security. And the way to do that, it looks almost exactly the same, is that rather than it leaning over the top and the weight's over the front of the feet, the weight is firmly planted right through the foot and you're pulling your bum down just behind the heel. So there's a bit of extra tension in the legs as you're doing so, but that should feel much more secure around the knees. Because now that stress is going this way rather than forwards. Might take a bit of practice doing that. And another way you can help that is by getting more of that engagement through the back of the legs. But partly that does involve getting down onto the floor in the first place. So let's have another practice getting down onto the floor. Putting the weight through the chair to help you. Controlling that down. And once you're on the floor this time, you want to be lying down on your back. Because this is an easier way, with less discomfort, to get more of this activation through the back of the legs and your bum. Arms out to the sides for balance if you need to, and you're driving your feet firmly down into the floor so the hips come up. Now remember, you're pushing into the ground all the time. And that's what forces the legs up. Because if you start to try and lift the hips, the effort is then on the front of the thigh and up into the hip. But we want it to be hamstrings and into your bum on the back there. At the top of the movement, hold that for a short while, just until you feel that your bum's starting to clench more, and then control that down. And repeat. Driving into the floor, hips coming up. Feel that tension through the back of the legs and into your bum. And controlling that down. Nice and steady on the movements. Ensure that you always push down. All the efforts in the back of the legs. Now, of course, if you're getting tired already, that's fine to take a bit of a break. This isn't an easy exercise for most people, especially when you're really concentrating and pushing into the floor rather than cheating as you go through it. And rest that down. Okay. So I'm going to come back over onto all fours again. If I move the step around to the front here, we also need to think about what else can we do to make it easier. So obviously before I had the step to the side of me, there's no reason why you can't have that in front of you, and it kind of acts a little bit like a plank type movement where from here you can then put your weight through the arms more and just straighten the legs to come back up. And then we reach forwards, take the feet back again, the knees bend. So what happens with this is you still need to have that control through the legs, but you're able to control yourself down by taking the weight through your arms. Notice that my arms are staying straight as I do this though. So if you need to bend the arms to do it, then obviously you need to have that upper body strength as well. So try not to overcomplicate it on this. Straighten the legs, lift the bum up, and you can step into it again. So it's worth giving that a bit of a practice as well. And once that gets more comfortable, then we do it in that split stance. So now the elbows are bending. But you need to have that control. If there's any point where you're dropping, that needs slamming down to the floor, that's something we need to be avoiding. So there we go. There are plenty of other exercises you can do, especially if you've got access to a gym, in which case a lot more leg strengthening work can be done. But you do need to practice those squat type movements as well. So if you have got a gym facility you can use, the idea is that you can use what's called the TRX, the suspension training systems, where you're holding onto the straps, and that way you're taking all the weight in your arms to help control you on the way down, so your legs don't have to work as hard, and use that to encourage some of that range of motion. So that works in the same way as when we're using a chair or something to give us that bit of extra control, but it's a useful way of being able to challenge that range of motion if you find you really struggle with that. And the other thing we haven't really talked about really is that motion around the ankles. So obviously as you're coming down towards the floor, there's quite a lot of movement by my knee over the front of the foot, which is how it should be. But if you're struggling to even do that, then there is a very simple stretch that you can add into your workouts. I'll turn this around again. I'm using the step because it's easy for you to see that, but you can use the wall or your stairs, anything. So you want to lift the toes up and then very gently push the hip forwards until you feel a very mild stretch through the calf there. So we're not trying to force that. Ease it back. Push that forwards again. So work on that ankle mobility a little bit extra there. Will also help you when it comes to getting down onto the floor. There we go. So let me know how you get on in the comments.